Welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses. It's our weekly preview, and it's the preview of this Aberdeen'S Celtic game. And we're delighted to be joined by Celtic fan and host of the Football Insomniac podcast, Colin Watt. Colin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Perfect. And it's not like it's been a quiet week at Parkhead, Calum. Plenty for us to discuss this week.
I know, so I threw up the pre-podcast notes up in the air, but it'll be interesting, so I'm looking forward to getting into it and hearing some thoughts from the Celtic side of things.
Yeah, not just on managerial talk, but also the season so far. So Colin, it's great to have you with us. Calum, we'll start though from an Aberdeen point of view. Can we build on last week's 1-0 win against Kilmarnock going into this game?
I would hope so, but given our recent track record against Celtic, that would all point towards the answer being no. But given their sort of performances, how they've struggled this season, you'd think now, if any time we have a chance to actually properly have a go at them, you'd think it would be this game coming up at the weekend. But as I said, with all track record of McInnes and just his record against Celtic, yeah, I'm a bit sceptical about it.
Yeah, and here's hoping he doesn't go man for man in the opening 20 minutes and we give the likes of Christopher Ayer and Colin McGregor the freedom of Parkhead again. But Colin, we're looking for our first win in 12 meetings against Celtic. 8 of those games, Celtic have scored 2 or more goals against us. And our last clean sheet against you was back in May of 2018. So despite what's been a pretty miserable week in terms of Celtic's turbulent season, maybe the right team to face?
I don't know. I mean, I always feel like Aberdeen always raise their game. Anytime they're playing someone against like Celtic or Rangers, it always seems to be that they find that extra level. And by all accounts, it can either come down to the performance of Joe Lewis. If he has a fantastic game, I think that Aberdeen have a really good chance of getting something. But, there's been some times I've seen Joe Lewis play and he's either been a 10 or a 2. And I think he was the star man against Kilmarnock the other day as well, just from the highlights that I've seen. So I think he'll be pivotal to how Aberdeen play at the weekend. Celtic, it's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, the departure of Neil Lennon this week maybe breathes a bit of new life into the team. Maybe some players that were previously frozen out, like Lee Griffiths, will have the chance to show what they can do. I always look forward to the Aberdeen games. It's always a really good game of football. And this one, I think it could be maybe 1 goal either way. But probably, if I'm looking at it with green tinted specs instead of red ones, I'd say Celtic are probably the favourites here.
Yeah, I think given the run of form we've been on, Calum, I think it's fair to say Celtic, despite the departure of Neil Lennon, should remain favourites, given especially our record down in Glasgow. But it's a good point Colin makes there. We're going to need another top performance from Joe Lewis and actually throughout the team. But given our last performance down there, despite losing, we kind of felt encouraged. Performances of Flo Canberry offering an attacking threat. And the last 5-10 minutes, a lot of balls into the box were causing Celtic problems. We saw obviously against Ross County conceding from a set piece. Calum, is that something we can look to take advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we highlighted before that first game that Celtic have not the best at defending set piece, not the best track record so far this season. And that happened, saw that beat Aberdeen'S for Ross County. And of course, we actually scored a set piece for once. We put a decent ball in the box against Kilmarnock, unlike us. So it should be something that we're looking to capitalise on, given the size of some of our big men we can get up in there. But it's just, I'm so sceptical, no matter what, whenever we play Celtic, even when they're on terrible form, because if they could hand pick a game to play, it's probably going to be us.
Yeah, no, Niall McGinn, someone we saw with a brilliant delivery for Callum Hendry, tends not to perform well against his boyhood heroes, I think it's fair to say. That's just our point of view. It just always seems to happen. But Colin, you highlighted players like Lee Griffiths who've been on the fringe or kind of exiled under Neil Lennon recently. Do you think this change of manager is going to help him? Even looking ahead to next month from a Scotland point of view, Griffiths and Ryan Christie, someone who's very much been struggling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, Ryan Christie, anyone that's seen me on a Celtic State of Mind or on my own podcast will know that my views on Ryan Christie are probably very X-rated. I think I said the other day I didn't realise that NASA had used Ryan Christie to launch their Mars probe. He's been right off the boil this season. But I mean, we know there's a good player there. You guys have seen that as well when he was out on loan. Yeah. So it's just getting the best out of him. That could come down to coaching in that aspect. I think it's the same with Lee Griffiths. Lee Griffiths has really needed someone to put an arm on his shoulder to get him through the troubles that he's been through. But you know what you can get out of him when you get him on top form. Mm-hmm. They were building a bit of a partnership up front between him and Edward, and then he was just dropped out of the team completely. You've seen guys like Albion Ayeti and Patrick Klamala get game time in front of him. But you know what you get out of Lee Griffiths. If you get him 15, 20 yards in front of goal, he's going to take a shot. 9 times out of 10, it finds the back of the net. And if Aberdeen defend the way they did at Celtic Park, where they gave Callum McGregor and David Turnbull the amount of space they gave him in the midfield, if you give that to Lee Griffiths, it could be the same all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we saw the how keen the likes of David Turnbull was to shoot on sight. Just how impressed have you been with David Turnbull this season, Colin?
Oh, he's been something else. In the kind of darkest of seasons that we've had, he's been a complete ray of sunshine. And do you know the I guess the annoying thing is that we didn't see him earlier. I know he had these troubles with some injuries and with being set aside for COVID with the Scotland under-21s. But what I've always said is, if he's doing this well in a team that's underperforming, can you imagine what it'll be like when the team's playing well again? He just sees a lot of things that other players don't see. He's looking for that killer pass. He's splitting defences, and he's shooting. Although he doesn't maybe score with every shot he takes, he's troubling goalkeepers. He's getting it in the right areas, and his set pieces this season have been fantastic as well. I think he's going to be one with a big future.
Yeah, absolutely. And Calum, that's creative spark for Celtic will be a threat to us, and that's something that we've lacked in recent weeks, especially with Ryan Hedges being out for the season. So we really need players. We saw briefly on Saturday, Lewis Ferguson and Canberra linking up well. We need to see more of that on Saturday, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. We need to see them playing with confidence, doing sort of what Turnbull does and getting the ball out of the drive. And I suppose that's what Ferguson did in stages against Kilmarnock. We saw him with a bit more freedom to break from midfield. If we're going to get anything from this weekend, we need to see the same again, and we need to see confident Flo Canberra try to make things happen as well.
Yeah, and ahead of this game, I'd labelled this as the safest job in Scotland derby, but Celtic decided to blink first. Well, or you could argue that Neil Lennon decided he took Celtic as far as he could and stepped aside, something that has been questioned around Mr. McInnes. But Calum, do you think, given the change in managerial situation at Celtic, we need to change our approach, or will there be a change in approach?
It's a worrying one because, okay, it's not like a brand new manager coming in and anything, but there will be sort of a new bounce and players with points to prove, as Colin mentioned, maybe players coming in that have been frozen out previously. So it'll be interesting to see how we actually approach it. But I don't know if they'll want to change things too much in terms of sort of midweek. They've probably started their prep. Don't want to sort of change the approach to the game late on.
Yeah, and Colin, Natasha, who was going to be joining this podcast, you're effectively the John Kennedy replacement. She'd asked to kind of ask you, do you think we'll see a new manager bounce effectively? I know it's an interim job for John Kennedy, or do you think will be another disjointed performance from Celtic at the weekend?
I'm not 100% certain on that, and if anyone has seen Natasha and then sees me, I'm definitely the John Kennedy replacement. I'm nowhere near good enough. But no, I think Celtic will probably stick with what they've been doing. I mean, they were on a run of 5 victories before that defeat against Ross County the other day. They've been doing the 4-4-2 diamond in the midfield, which means we play very narrow, which probably sets out to Aberdeen's strengths playing the 3-5-2 because they can be able to attack Celtic down the wings. The middle of the park is going to be where the game will be won and lost. And as a Celtic fan, you're hoping guys like McGregor. I think Brown will probably start. He seems to be coming back into the frame. Brown, McGregor, Rogic, Turnbull, whoever's going to be playing in that four can put a bit of bite in, because that's what makes the Celtic Aberdeen games really interesting games to watch. Looking at the midfield for Aberdeen, McCrory and Ferguson. I think McCrory was pretty quiet his last time he was at Celtic Park.
And playing in centre back as well probably didn't help him.
Yeah, but I think he's definitely been one of the better players I've seen for Aberdeen this season. But Lewis Ferguson for me, he always flatters to deceive, especially when he comes up against some of the bigger teams. And the only thing I can almost guarantee when Lewis Ferguson plays Celtic is that he picks up a yellow card. So take the odds out for that one at the weekend.
yeah, that's probably a good tip every week, not just against Celtic. Just on the managerial change, Colin, it's good to have a Celtic perspective ahead of the weekend, but a good talking point. Who would be the likely candidates you'd be interested to see take over from Neil Lennon?
So we spoke about this the other day on a Celtic State of Mind, and a couple of people threw guys into the hat like Roberto Martinez, Sean Maloney as a kind of duo, Stevie Clark. The one that's always interested me has been Eddie Howe. I think he's a young progressive manager who gets completely underestimated for the job that he's done at Bournemouth, managing to take that team up to the Premier League, keeping them up there and developing some really good players. And that's something that I think Neil Lennon's biggest flaw was that if you take a look at the development of Celtic players over the last 18 months to 2 years, I can't really think of many that have progressed. A lot of them have kind of went back the way, like Ryan Christie, like we mentioned, and a lot of the young players never saw a route into the first team. We saw so many of them going to Germany, going down south. So I'd like to see someone that has new, fresh ideas, and it looks as if that we're going to be appointing a sporting director as well. So I think that rules out some of the bigger names that were potentially linked with the club, because are they really going to work with someone above them? Are they not getting full control of the club? So it'll be an interesting one for me. My choice would be Eddie Howe.
Yeah, Calum, it's quite crazy when you think of some of the names that have been linked, or Colin mentioning Eddie Howe, Sean, who we had obviously on for the darts. He was looking at the likes of Rafa Benitez, and we were naming names of Stephen Robinson as potential replacements of, or the Cowley brothers if McInnes was to go one way. It's just the different, I suppose, to quote McInnes, budgets.
Yeah, quite a contrast. As long as Celtic stay away from my Rafa Benitez, as a man who's fond of Newcastle, stay away from him. I couldn't deal with that. But yeah, it's quite a contrast, as you say. The budget's quite big difference, but we won't get into that. We'll let McInnes probably use that as an excuse after the game. But yeah, the Cowley brothers are one that I'd probably thought of. Not thought of, but that's my favourite one. My favourite possible candidate. But it's just so mental hearing the difference between the names that Colin's just mentioned compared to us. It's a big contrast.
Just a tiny bit. Maloney was one I'd quite like the left field look of, but it'd be interesting to see Martinez and Maloney both giving up Belgium for the SPFL. But from an opposition point of view then, Colin, we've kind of mucked and moaned about McInnes in recent weeks and the form we've been on. Celtic have been on poor form as well throughout the season. What do you make of the Aberdeen fans' disgruntlement towards McInnes?
I think it's probably a case of McInnes has been there for so long that you're needing some fresh injection in there. There's kind of a bit of staleness creeping through the team. You take a look at some of the players that's been there for a long time. Like Niall McGinn's there for his second spell now. Guys like Shea Logan that have been there a long time. So it is needing a bit of freshness through that team. And when you know that potentially the best that you're going to get is second, and that's if one of Celtic or Rangers slip up as badly as they have done like this season. Aberdeen should have been right up Celtic's coattails. They should have been pushing for that second spot, because you never know how long it's going to take for that opportunity to arise again. And with what you get for second place in Scotland this season, it's into the Champions League qualifiers. Can you imagine the boost that would have gave to an Aberdeen or a Hibs? It's massive. And looking at the run of games, what was that? 4 or 5 games without a goal for Aberdeen? 6 games without a goal. You just think of all those drop points. If you just turned them into victories, how close would that be, and how exciting would it be going into this game, knowing that potentially you could be battling out for second place?
And Calum, it's an excellent point Colin makes. How frustrating is it?
It is interesting to hear a non-Aberdeen fan actually saying that we should have been pushing Celtic for seconds. That's probably what my biggest gripe is. If in any regular season, if Celtic were still on the form they'd been on and then Rangers were pushing them or whatever, vice versa, we couldn't really complain with like third being our like ceiling, I suppose. But just given how badly Celtic have performed across the whole season, and as you mentioned, some of the drop points, it has just been so frustrating. It wasn't even just in that spell as well. There was around the spell when we got knocked out of the Betfred Cup and we dropped points at the minute and then, and Hamilton, I think, as well. Yeah, it's just, you see them adding up and it's just so frustrating because we could be way, way, way closer to Celtic, if not actually in second. It's just a big gripe of mine.
I mean, for me, the thing is, when you look at it, I mean, I think it's 17 games that Aberdeen have dropped points this season as opposed to 13 wins. You've got to first get a winning record. Once you get a winning record, then you start to challenge. But then Aberdeen see themselves as a Europa League team. They want to make the Europa League. If you're not beating teams like St Mirren, like Hamilton, then how do you ever expect to compete? That's when you need to freshen things up, when you need to start looking at new ideas. Just take a look at what Livingston done this season by bringing in David Martindale at a kind of an early point in the season. It's turned them around and they're pushing for the top 5, which is a fantastic achievement for them.
Yeah, and it's absolutely right, Colin. It's a mentality. It's something that Calum, we've discussed on the show many a time, that I don't want to use the word, but it kind of feels like a loser's mentality where we always seem to accept second best. And, it's not just the drop points and the draws recently, but the games against Celtic where the game at Pittodrie where we should have won, we're just about threw that away and ended up scraping a draw. We didn't turn up at Hampden again against Celtic, and then at Parkhead we sat off you for half an hour, went 1-0 down, and it took till the 80th minute to try and look inventive and dangerous. Okay, Canberra had the shot off the post, we had the shot from Dean Campbell across the face, but there was nothing clear cut. So even against Celtic and Rangers this season as well, we've not been able to step up and actually impose ourselves in games, barring, I think, bar that game at Pittodrie, Calum, and that's equally as frustrating, let alone dropping the points to these so-called lesser teams.
Yeah, it's not only about the results, the performances as well. If you could pinpoint things that's like, that's gone differently, then I suppose maybe we would be in a better place. But the performances have been very, very bad. And the listeners or viewers of the show will know that we do like to complain about that. I want to be entertained, which just hasn't been happening. But yeah, it's a bit concerning. I would really, really like to see us have a proper go at Celtic this weekend in a little bit of disarray. We've got nothing to lose. People still wouldn't expect us to win, even just given our record against Celtic in recent times. If we could just have a go at them for once and see what they're really about, that would be nice.
And if we can't, the biggest issue. Sorry, I was just going to say. I think one of the biggest issues I've seen from watching Aberdeen this season is that lack of firepower up front. I mean, it just looks as if losing someone like Sam Cosgrove in the middle of the season. Does that suggest that Aberdeen were just content with where they were going to be? Because bringing in guys like Fraser Hornby and bringing in Canberra, they're short-term solutions. And it's not up to the level of what Sam Cosgrove can give. You see the trouble that he can cause defences. Canberra done it in phases against Celtic, but he's a very hot and cold player. At least the one thing you can say about Cosgrove, he was consistent. I don't know. I think it's probably in the same scenario as Celtic. There's probably a rebuild needed at Aberdeen this summer.
Yeah, I think the problem for Cosgrove this season was his consistency wasn't of the sufficient level where he was contributing in terms of goals, and I think the interest from elsewhere had possibly turned his head. But the lack of firepower is a concern, and the point I was going to make is if Saturday is our best opportunity to have a go at Celtic, and if we fail to do that, then for me questions need to be asked at why we're not taking advantage when Celtic have had this turnaround. But on that point, Colin, are you surprised, maybe even disappointed that there hasn't been more of a challenge from not just ourselves but Hibs in fighting Celtic for second? And if there was, I guess it's obviously hypothetical now, do you think that would have pushed Celtic on this season or potentially led to Lennon departing sooner?
I think you're probably more right on Lennon departing sooner. I think if the league was lost, I mean, to me, the league was lost a long time ago, but I think the board still believed there was a chance he could turn it round. And when you're on a 5-game winning streak, it's probably quite hard to sack your manager. But when I take a look at some of the games, Hibs gave us a really good game at Easter Road. You guys gave us a cracking game up at Pittodrie. But those results are few and far between this season. You just see Celtic perhaps on a poor run of form, then they go to Kilmarnock and beat them 4-0 at Rugby Park. Yeah. I think across the league this season, the standard has dropped quite a bit. I know I heard some of the pundits on Sports Scene trying to say that the league's at the best level it's been in years. I really don't buy that at all. I think a lot of the teams, Hibs, Aberdeen, even I'm surprised at Motherwell this season being so far down the table. There just doesn't seem to be that kind of possibility that when Rangers or Celtic come into town, you're thinking, oh, this could go either way. What we've been used to over the last couple of years, over the course of the season, it's been more than likely that the bigger team will win. And that probably ruins the standard of football across the league.
Yeah, and I think though that the excitement of when one of Rangers or Celtic come to town and there possibly being an upset, if you want to look at it that way, has been ruined by the fact there's no fans in the ground. And for me, I think that's been a big part of Rangers' successes, because we know how easily the crowds at Ibrox can turn on them if games aren't going their way. They've not had that pressure of the fans there. And similarly, you look at Celtic and potentially Aberdeen in some of our closer games where fans would be trying to encourage the team on. The teams haven't had that. Should the players be able to do that themselves? It remains to be seen. Calum, we spoke to Steve Tosh on Monday night and he said himself how difficult it would be playing in front of no crowds.
Yeah, he said he would hate it, but that's a good point to make. I think in some of the closer games, especially in the recent run of form, given all the 0-0 draws, we might have maybe seen them being able to push on and find a late winner like we had seen previously in previous seasons. Even if football wasn't great, we might be able to sneak something. That might have happened, I suppose, but again, everyone's in the same situation. Every club's in the same situation, so they've got to find a way, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think as well that the standard of the league, I totally agree, Colin. It's definitely not a superb standard this season, and I think it's everybody's, barring obviously Rangers, everyone's beating everybody, and teams are dropping points across the board, which has obviously seen the gaps, and it's just been frustrating from an Aberdeen point of view that we haven't kept that level of consistency that we're used to. Although Calum, if you look at our points tally from last season, we're actually very much in line with where we were at this point last season. It's actually just the standard of football that's causing the issues.
I didn't actually know we were on a similar sort of level. Shows how much I do my research. So there we go. But yeah, I think the sort of similar standard of football. I think also then with going back to fans, us not actually being able to be there and still being able to enjoy the day out or whatever, it's made it even worse because we're watching the terrible football sat at home and it's just a catastrophe. Yeah,
I'm sure we're within 3 points of where we were at this point last season. But again, it's been highlighted the fact that we've dropped silly points and we've not been able to stay close to Celtic. Given, you look at them, us winning this weekend and then they drop points to Ross County. It's frustrating. Mm-hmm. But we'll kind of head towards the game at the weekend. We don't want to take up too much of your time, Colin. But, we appreciate you giving us a Celtic point of view here. Calum, we lined up quite defensively last time we went to Parkhead, and as we've discussed already in this episode, we sat off Celtic in the opening 20 minutes. Do you think we will see Calum Hendry? Obviously, Fraser Hornby's injury looks like it'll be a long one, so expect Calum Hendry to start. But would you expect Niall McGinn and Conor McLennan to keep their places in the starting 11?
I would expect them to keep their places, and I think probably McLennan would maybe deserve to keep his place. But McGinn, I'm not sure. But then you look at the alternative. Matty Kennedy's been very hot and cold as well so far this season. I'd like to see us sort of, well, obviously Hendry will come in for Hornby, but not take half an hour to get going. That would be nice this time. Give us sort of a half a chance would be good. I don't think the performance against Kilmarnock was terrible. It was definitely better than what we've seen. He actually scored, so that was a bonus, and got the win. So if we can build off that, I suppose maybe there'll be a little bit more confidence as well in a few of their performances recently as well. Like guys like Canberra, Campbell's played pretty decent. So there's no reason for us to set up as defensively and give them a half an hour head start this time round. So hopefully we'll see us start a bit more positively this time.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think, McGinn's the funny one, as we've touched on. His performances aren't always great at Parkhead, but we know what quality he can bring to the team if he's on his game. Matty Kennedy, as you rightly say, has been kind of blowing hot and cold recently, but Canberra for me is going to be the key. Celtic's defence has looked shaky at the best of times this season, especially if it's featuring Shane Duffy. So, Canberra is going to be probably the key to us creating chances. He likes having shots from distance. He'll get in behind where possible. So if we can get up and supply him. I'm looking at Calum Hendry, who, despite scoring last week, was largely quiet throughout. We need to see more from him for the whole game as well. So Celtic are there to be got at. It's whether or not McInnes and the players believe they can do so. And like you say, let's hope it doesn't take them half an hour to start believing and going 1-0 down. Mm-hmm. Colin, though, looking towards Celtic, Greg Taylor went off injured against Ross County.
Yep.
I assume Diego Laxalt will fill in for him in defence?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a muscle injury for Greg, so he might be out for a couple of weeks.
And you highlighted Scott Brown as somebody you expected to see starting. I put down in my notes I thought Sorrow might have returned to the starting lineup. Do you think the change of manager might have an influence on your midfield? Obviously, you highlighted names like Tom Rogic, who hasn't been a regular starter, a name that strikes fear and will forever haunt Aberdeen fans. And again, fringe players, Lee Griffiths, Ryan Christie, not on a great run of form. May he drop down to the bench?
Do you know what? I'm not sure there'll be a vast amount of changes from the side that played against Ross County at the weekend. I think we're starting to get a settled back four. Greg Taylor's injury is obviously a like-for-like swap with Diego Laxalt coming in. I was actually quite disappointed for Greg. I thought he was coming on to a real run of form at Celtic. Mm-hmm. And you just wonder if he was maybe playing his way in as the third choice left back at the Euros this summer.
Yeah.
And you could see in his face when he was coming off, he was absolutely gutted. So that was a real shame. Stephen Welsh has been a bit of a revelation since he came in. The fact that he's holding his jersey over Shane Duffy says a lot maybe about either Shane Duffy or Stephen Welsh. You can make your own mind up there. Scott Bain is the number one. We don't even know who number one is this season. Maybe now that Lennon's gone, we'll maybe see Barkas back in there. It wouldn't surprise me. The midfield diamond, it's either going to be Sorrow or Brown. I have a feeling just with the likes of Ferguson and McCrory in midfield, I think Kennedy will go for Brown. That actually feels weird to say. Kennedy's picking the team at the weekend. I'm not quite used to that yet. Callum McGregor is probably going to keep his position alongside David Turnbull. David Turnbull has to be one of the first names on your team sheet. It's just who plays at the front of that, at the top of the diamond, whether it be Ryan Christie or, I'll say it quietly, Tom Rogic. Mm-hmm. And I think it will be Edward and Griffiths up front. So I think Celtic's frailties are there for everyone to see. You put a ball into the box and it causes a lot of confusion. Celtic have conceded the most amount of goals from set pieces this year. I think it's almost like 40% of the goals we've conceded are from set pieces. So that's got to be a big target area for Aberdeen. Celtic are there to get caught at, and I also think Aberdeen are there to get caught at as well. So it could be quite an end-to-end game. I did say earlier I think it will be one goal in it and we'll sneak it by one, but I mean, if there's an early goal, it could be a really entertaining game to watch. A quick one though, are you guys able to watch this at the weekend on Red TV, or what's the scenario there?
I was going to bring it up because this was a infamous talking point last time. No, away fans don't get pay-per-view option. It's a shame. Celtic seem to be the only club that have not allowed away fans to view games, so I'll be providing Calum with a suitable stream that is linked to Red TV. I think it's kind of got like one of them foreign links, so it lets me watch it anyway. But no, it's your suitable or unsuitable streaming sites, which is a real shame, because when you're stuck at home, I mean, some people might have begrudged paying the pay-per-view to Celtic, who knows? But it's the fact that it's not accessible to fans, and I'm not just being an Aberdeen, it's been applied to counties and Johnson and whatnot. It's a real shame.
Yeah, I think it's a complete farce. I mean, the game should be available. For me, I thought when everyone was going to have to watch the games from home, it would have been on a centralised platform where you could have watched every game. Especially the fact that there was so much on about how Sky Sports had provided this, they were allowing this to happen. You'd have thought they'd have took better control of it, but well, I mean, there'll be plenty of links out there. I'm sure a lot of people will have things like IPTV to watch as well. So I just feel sorry for anyone that has to listen to the Celtic TV commentary, because even as a Celtic fan, it's like listening to paint dry. It's terrible.
Well, it can't be worse than some of our commentary this season, as many of our viewers and listeners will attest to. But Colin, you know, it's been great having you on the show to provide an insight, not in just ahead of this weekend, but also kind of how your feelings on the season so far. We do have a lot of Celtic fans actually tune in to our show, believe it or not, because they enjoy the humorous take. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But where can Scottish football fans, because your show's not just Celtic based, so where can viewers find your show?
So we are over at A State of Mind on YouTube. My show's the Football Insomniac, and this week I'm joined by Clyde One's Alison Conroy. Taking a look at the social media abuse that some footballers have received and the plans for the lower league football to restart. So you can catch that. It's usually Wednesdays at 11 a.m. on A State of Mind. This week it's Friday due to the Neil Lennon leaving. He's still holding one over us, but we're live Friday 11 a.m.
And Calum, abuse to football players is something we're all too akin to in recent weeks with certain departures from the football club.
Don't mention it, I'll just get angry.
And then obviously something that, you know, in our now most popular show with Jack Grimmer, he talked on quite brilliantly as well. So if you haven't tuned into that Jack Grimmer interview, make sure you do. And our interview with Steve Tosh will be out in the early part of next week. Calum, Colin, thanks for joining us. And as ever, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the video. Only 22 to go before we do our first watch along. Calum's thrilled at the prospect.
I'm not looking forward to that. It'll be a disaster from start to finish. But like I said, don't be sure to subscribe if you want to see me suffer, basically.
And I'll make sure, Calum, well, no, it's not going to be this weekend. We're looking at probably after the split, so I don't know how entertaining that'll be. Especially given our post-split record.
Very true. Very, very true.
And we'll be back with our full-time reaction to the weekend's game. Calum will have paid attention. Hopefully, something positive to take from a trip to Parkhead.
We can but hope. Thanks very much for tuning in, everybody.